The first discrepancy appeared on a Tuesday morning in March, buried in our quarterly audit like a tumor waiting to be discovered. I'd built Crawford Logistics from nothing over 35 years, turning a single delivery truck into a $180 million transportation empire that employed 340 people across Georgia. At 69, I thought I knew every dollar that moved through our accounts. I was wrong. The transaction showed. $47,000 transferred to Southeast Development Solutions for warehouse expansion. Consultation. I'd never heard of the company, never authorized the expense. My first instinct was to call Derek immediately. He was our CFO, after all. My son, who'd taken over financial operations 3 years ago when I decided to step back from day-to-day management. Instead, I sat in my corner office on the 15th floor of our Atlanta headquarters, staring at the printout while traffic hummed below on Peachtree Street. Something cold settled in my stomach, a father's intuition that whispered warnings I didn't want to hear. Derek had always been different from his older sister Sarah, who'd chosen medicine over the family business. Where Sarah was methodical and honest to a fault, Derek possessed a restless ambition that sometimes made me uncomfortable. He'd graduated from Emory's business school with honors, understood finance better than I ever would, but there was something in his eyes, a hunger that went beyond legitimate success. When he'd asked to become CFO at 28, I'd hesitated. Not because he lacked competence, but because he seemed to view money as a game rather than a responsibility. Still, he was family. Crawford Logistics was built to be a legacy, passed down through generations. Who else could I trust with our empire? Now, staring at this suspicious transaction, I realized trust might have been my greatest mistake. I pulled up our banking portal and began scrolling through recent payments. Southeast Development Solutions appeared 4 more times in the past 6 months, totaling $234,000. Each payment was professionally documented with invoices and approval codes. Derek's approval codes. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my phone, then stopped. If Derek was involved in something inappropriate, confronting him directly would only prompt him to cover his tracks. Instead, I needed to understand the full scope of whatever was happening. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a yellow legal pad, writing Southeast Development Solutions at the top. Below it, I noted the dates and amounts of each transaction. If my son was taking what wasn't his, I needed evidence before making accusations that could destroy our family. The afternoon passed slowly as I searched through financial records, finding more suspicious payments to companies I'd never heard of: Coastal Transport Consulting, Innovative Supply Chain Management, Strategic Logistics Partners. Each sounded legitimate enough to pass casual scrutiny, but none existed in our approved vendor database. By closing time, I'd identified nearly $400,000 in questionable transactions over the past 8 months. The pattern was clear. Derek was systematically diverting company funds through fictitious consulting agreements. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike in our Buckhead driveway, was taking what wasn't his from the company that bore our family name. I locked the documents in my personal safe that evening, knowing I faced a choice that would define the remainder of my life. I could confront Derek immediately, demand explanations, hope this was somehow a misunderstanding. Or I could do something far more difficult. Watch carefully, document everything, and discover just how deep this betrayal ran. That night, lying awake in the bedroom I'd shared with Margaret for 43 years before she passed away, I made my decision. If Derek was truly misappropriating funds from Crawford Logistics, I wouldn't just stop him. I would ensure he faced the full consequences of his actions, even if it meant sacrificing everything I'd built. The next morning, I began building a case against my own son. 3 weeks of careful investigation revealed the sophistication of Derek's operation. What I'd initially mistaken for simple misappropriation was actually an elaborate network of fictitious companies, each designed to siphon money from Crawford Logistics with surgical precision. Derek had created 17 shell companies over 2 years, each with professional websites, legitimate-sounding business addresses, and detailed invoices that would pass any casual audit. Southeast Development Solutions operated from a virtual office in Midtown. Coastal Transport Consulting listed a downtown Atlanta address that turned out to be a mail forwarding service. Every company appeared credible on paper. As CFO, Derek had the authority to approve payments up to $100,000 without board oversight, a limit I'd established to streamline operations. He stayed just below that threshold, creating a pattern of $85,000 and $95,000 payments that avoided triggering additional approvals. The methodology was brilliant in its simplicity. I hired a private investigator without telling anyone, not even my assistant Janet, who'd been with the company for 22 years. The PI's report arrived on a Thursday afternoon, and what I read made my stomach turn. Derek wasn't just taking company money, he was living an entirely different life with our resources. The investigator had followed Derek to Miami Beach, where he maintained a luxury apartment in a high-rise overlooking Biscayne Bay. The monthly rent alone was $12,000, paid through Innovative Supply Chain Management, one of his shell companies. Security footage showed Derek arriving in different expensive cars: a red Ferrari, a black Porsche, a white BMW, all leased through fictitious consulting agreements with Crawford Logistics. During one Miami weekend, Derek spent $8,000 at a single restaurant, entertaining people he introduced as business associates. The server overheard him bragging about his transportation empire and his plans to expand into real estate development. He was using our stolen money to create a false identity as a successful entrepreneur. Back in Atlanta, Derek maintained the perfect facade. He arrived at work each morning in his modest accord, wore conservative suits, and spoke respectfully about growing the family business. During our monthly father-son lunches at the Commerce Club, he'd express concern about market challenges and suggest strategic investments to expand our operations. Those strategic investments, I now realized, were code for his next theft. The scope of Derek's betrayal extended beyond money. He'd manipulated our accounting manager, Linda Williams, into processing his fraudulent invoices by claiming they were part of a confidential expansion project that required discretion. Linda, a single mother of two who'd worked for us for 8 years, genuinely believed she was helping secure the company's future. Derek had also convinced our head of operations, Mike Torres, to sign off on fake equipment purchases by presenting forged quotes from legitimate suppliers. Mike trusted Derek completely, we all did, and never questioned the CFO's financial decisions. The most painful discovery came when I reviewed Derek's personal expenses over the past 2 years. While living modestly in Atlanta, he'd spent nearly $400,000 in Miami alone. Private jet charters to New York and Los Angeles, VIP tables at exclusive nightclubs, a Rolex collection worth more than most of our employees' annual salaries. My son had stolen approximately $2.8 million over 2 years and showed no signs of stopping. That evening, I sat in my study at home in Buckhead, surrounded by evidence of Derek's crimes. Bank statements, photographs from the private investigator, copies of fraudulent invoices, enough proof to send my son to federal prison for decades. I could have called him that night, could have confronted him with the evidence, demanded repayment, hoped he'd learned his lesson. But as I stared at photos of Derek laughing with friends at a Miami Beach club, spending money stolen from his own family's company, I realized something had broken inside me. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was calculated, systematic theft from people who trusted him completely. If Derek wanted to destroy our family legacy, I decided he would face the full consequences of that choice. The security company arrived at Crawford Logistics on a Saturday morning in May, when the building was empty except for maintenance staff. I told them I was concerned about industrial espionage, competitors trying to access our client databases and shipping routes. It wasn't entirely false. Within 6 hours, they'd installed high-definition cameras in Derek's office, the accounting department, and our main conference room. The system connected directly to my home computer, allowing me to monitor everything in real time. For the first time in months, I felt like I was regaining control. I also hired Williams & Associates, Atlanta's most respected forensic accounting firm. Margaret Williams, no relation to Arlinda Williams, was a former FBI financial crimes investigator who specialized in corporate fraud cases. Her team could trace money through the most complex shell company structures. "Mr. Crawford," Margaret said during our first meeting at her downtown office, "what you're describing suggests wire fraud, money laundering, and possibly RICO violations. These are federal crimes with serious prison time." "That's what I'm counting on," I replied. Margaret's expression remained professional, but I caught something in her eyes. Surprise, maybe respect. Most fathers wouldn't pursue federal charges against their own sons. Most sons wouldn't systematically destroy their family's life work. Over the following weeks, Margaret's team began the painstaking process of documenting every fraudulent transaction. They created detailed financial maps showing how money flowed from Crawford Logistics through Derek's shell companies to his personal accounts. Each transfer was cataloged with dates, amounts, and supporting documentation. The surveillance footage proved even more valuable than the financial analysis. I watched Derek work each day, observing his complete comfort with deception. He'd process fraudulent invoices while chatting casually with Linda about her children's soccer games. He'd approve fake payments while discussing quarterly projections with Mike Torres. Most disturbing were the phone calls I overheard through the surveillance system. Derek would call Miami contacts from his office, using company time to plan weekend trips funded by stolen money. I listened to him laugh about the old man, me being too trusting to notice missing funds. "He built this company from nothing," Derek said during one recorded conversation. "But he doesn't understand modern finance. As long as the monthly reports look good, he's happy." Meanwhile, I began coordinating with federal authorities. Margaret Williams introduced me to Special Agent Sarah Chen of the FBI's White Collar Crime Division. Agent Chen explained that the Department of Justice was increasingly focused on corporate fraud cases, especially those involving family-owned businesses. "We need time to build an airtight case," Agent Chen explained during a meeting at the FBI's Atlanta field office. "If we move too quickly, his defense lawyers might argue entrapment or claim the evidence was obtained improperly." "How much time do you need?" 18 months, maybe 2 years. We want to catch him in the act multiple times, document a clear pattern of criminal behavior. The goal is a plea deal that guarantees significant prison time. 2 years meant allowing Derek to potentially steal millions more. It meant watching him destroy Crawford Logistics while I documented every crime. It meant sacrificing the company I'd spent 35 years building to ensure my son faced justice. "I understand the personal cost," Agent Chen continued. "You're essentially letting him destroy your business to build our case." I thought about Margaret, my wife of 4 decades, who'd passed away believing our family legacy was secure. I thought about the 340 employees who trusted me to protect their livelihoods. I thought about Derek, laughing with friends in Miami while his theft threatened everything we'd built. "Agent Chen," I said, "some crimes require complete consequences." That evening, I sat in my home office watching live footage of Derek working late, probably processing more fraudulent invoices. My son had no idea his father was building a federal case designed to destroy him completely. The next morning, I began Phase 2 of my plan, allowing Derek to steal enough money to guarantee decades in federal prison. Sunday dinners at my Buckhead home had always been sacred in the Crawford family. Even after Margaret passed away, Derek continued the tradition, arriving each week with flowers and updates about his life. Now these gatherings felt like elaborate theater productions where I played the role of trusting father while my son performed as the dutiful heir. "The Miami expansion is going better than expected," Derek said over pot roast on a humid June evening. "Those consulting contracts are really paying off. We should see improved margins by Q4. I nodded approvingly, cutting my meat with steady hands despite knowing those consulting contracts were funding his luxury apartment and Ferrari. "That's wonderful, son. Your mother would be proud of how you've grown the business." Derek's smile never wavered. "She always said Crawford Logistics would outlast us all." The irony was suffocating. Derek was systematically destroying the company while speaking about its permanence. Meanwhile, I was allowing that destruction to ensure his complete downfall. We were both destroying Crawford Logistics, just for different reasons. Monday morning staff meetings became equally surreal performances. Derek would present financial reports showing healthy cash flow and growing profits, all while his latest theft sat in accounts I monitored through the FBI's surveillance system. Our operational efficiency is up 12% year over year, Derek announced to our senior management team. The strategic partnerships we've developed are really strengthening our market position. Mike Torres, our operations head, beamed with pride. Derek's financial management has been outstanding. We're positioning Crawford Logistics for major expansion. I watched Linda Williams take notes, genuinely excited about the company's apparent success. She had no idea the strategic partnerships Derek referenced were actually shell companies designed to rob her of job security. None of them knew their CFO was actively destroying their futures. The surveillance footage revealed Derek's complete comfort with deception. I watched him forge my signature on authorization forms, lie smoothly to vendors about payment delays, and manipulate accounting software to hide missing funds. He'd become a master criminal while maintaining the facade of devoted son and responsible executive. Agent Chen provided regular updates about the federal investigation's progress. We've documented over $4 million in fraudulent transfers, she reported during one of our monthly meetings. The case is becoming stronger every week. How much longer do we need? Another year, maybe 18 months. We want to catch him stealing at least $10 million total. That guarantees federal sentencing guidelines of 20 to 25 years. $10 million. Nearly half of Crawford Logistics' annual revenue. I was allowing Derek to gut the company to ensure he spent most of his adult life in federal prison. The emotional toll was becoming unbearable. I'd started seeing a therapist, Dr. Elizabeth Harper, though I couldn't tell her the full truth about my situation. Instead, I spoke vaguely about family-business conflicts and difficult decisions regarding inheritance. Betrayal by family members creates unique psychological trauma, Dr. Harper explained during one session. The person you trusted most has violated that trust in the most fundamental way. What if stopping the betrayal requires personal sacrifice? I asked. Sometimes protecting yourself means accepting losses in other areas. You can't control other people's choices, only your response to them. But I was controlling Derek's choices by allowing them to continue. Every day I didn't confront him was a day he chose to steal more money, destroy more lives, dig his legal grave deeper. The most painful moments came when employees expressed concern about rumors of financial problems. Our drivers had heard other companies were offering higher wages. Office staff noticed delayed equipment purchases and postponed facility improvements. Mr. Crawford, Janet, my assistant, said during a private moment, "Some people are worried about job security. Should I reassure them that everything's stable?" "Tell them Crawford Logistics has weathered many storms," I replied. "We'll survive this one, too. It wasn't entirely false. The company might survive, though not in its current form. After Derek's arrest and the civil asset forfeiture proceedings, whatever remained of Crawford Logistics would be a shadow of its former self." That evening, I sat in my study reviewing the latest surveillance footage. Derek was working late again, probably processing another fraudulent payment to fund his Miami lifestyle. He looked confident, relaxed, completely unaware that every keystroke was being recorded by federal investigators. My son had stolen over $5 million while I watched, documented and enabled his crimes. In another year, he would face federal charges that would destroy his life completely. Some nights, I wondered if I was becoming as calculating and cold as Derek himself. Other nights, I knew justice sometimes required impossible choices. The private investigator's latest report arrived with photographs that made my blood run cold. Derek wasn't just living extravagantly in Miami, he was presenting himself as a legitimate millionaire entrepreneur, completely separate from Crawford Logistics. His Biscayne Bay apartment occupied the entire 42nd floor of a luxury high-rise, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. Monthly rent, $15,000, paid through strategic logistics partners, one of his newer shell companies. The apartment was professionally decorated with modern furniture that cost more than most of our employees' annual salaries. Derek had established himself in Miami's elite social circles using our stolen money. He frequented exclusive clubs like Live at the Fontainebleau, where VIP table service cost $5,000 per night. Security footage showed him entertaining groups of beautiful women, ordering bottles of champagne that cost more than our drivers earned in a week. His vehicle collection had expanded beyond the Ferrari and Porsche. He now owned a Lamborghini Huracan, a Mercedes G-Wagon, and a Aston Martin DB11, all leased through fictitious Crawford Logistics consulting agreements. The monthly payments alone exceeded $18,000, enough to fund our entire fleet maintenance budget. But Derek's most audacious deception involved his fake business persona. He'd created a website for Crawford International, claiming to be CEO of a global transportation conglomerate with operations across North America. Professional headshots showed him in expensive suits, standing confidently in front of luxury cars and private jets. The investigator had recordings of Derek at Miami networking events, introducing himself as an Atlanta-based transportation mogul expanding into Florida markets. He'd hand out business cards listing himself as founder and CEO of multiple companies, all funded by money stolen from the real Crawford Logistics. "My father built a small trucking company," Derek told a group of potential investors at a South Beach restaurant. "I've transformed it into a multi-state operation. We're looking at IPO possibilities within 2 years." Meanwhile, back in Atlanta, Crawford Logistics was slowly hemorrhaging money. Our credit line was nearly maxed out due to Derek's systematic theft. We'd postponed equipment purchases, delayed facility maintenance, and frozen hiring. The 340 employees who depended on us had no idea their livelihoods were funding their CFO's fantasy life. Derek's Miami social media presence revealed the full scope of his delusional self-image. Instagram posts showed him on private yachts, dining at exclusive restaurants, attending charity galas as a prominent Atlanta businessman. He'd tagged locations across Florida, New York, and California, creating the impression of a jet-setting executive managing a transportation empire. The FBI's surveillance had captured Derek's most damaging behavior during his Miami trips. He'd begun recruiting potential investors for fake business opportunities, using fabricated financial statements from Crawford Logistics to support his claims. Agent Chen confirmed this constituted additional federal crimes: securities fraud and investment fraud. "He's not just stealing from your company anymore," Agent Chen explained during our monthly briefing. "He's using that stolen money to defraud other victims. This significantly increases his potential sentence." Derek had also started a romantic relationship with a Miami socialite named Victoria Castellanos, daughter of a prominent real estate developer. Victoria's Instagram account showed expensive dinners, luxury shopping trips, and weekend getaways to the Bahamas, all funded by Crawford Logistics money. Derek was literally stealing from his family to impress another family. The most painful discovery came when I learned Derek had told Victoria he was planning to buy out his father's old-fashioned business and transform it into a modern logistics empire. He was planning to steal the entire company, not just embezzle from it. Victoria's father, according to our investigator, was considering Derek as a partner in several Florida development projects. Derek had presented him with falsified financial documents showing Crawford Logistics as a $400 million company with Derek as majority owner. He was using our stolen money to establish credibility for even larger, fraudulent schemes. While Derek lived his Miami fantasy, our Atlanta employees struggled with the reality of a failing company. Linda Williams had asked about delayed paychecks. Mike Torres expressed concern about our aging truck fleet. Janet, my assistant, mentioned that several drivers were considering offers from competitors. I sat in my office each evening, watching surveillance footage of Derek processing more fraudulent payments while our employees worried about their futures. He would approve transfers to his shell companies, then immediately book flights to Miami for weekend parties funded by those same stolen dollars. The dichotomy was staggering. Derek worked at Crawford Logistics Monday through Friday, playing the role of concerned CFO and devoted son. Then he flew to Miami for weekends as a transportation magnate, spending our money to maintain an elaborate lie about his success and importance. By December, Derek had stolen over $8 million. His Miami lifestyle required approximately $200,000 per month to maintain. Apartment rent, car payments, entertainment, travel, gifts for Victoria, and investments in fake business opportunities. Agent Chen confirmed we were approaching the threshold needed for maximum federal sentencing. Another 6 months of documentation should guarantee 25 years minimum. His investment fraud activities have made this a complex RICO case. That night, I reviewed photographs of Derek's latest Miami party, celebrating New Year's Eve at a private club with Victoria and her wealthy friends. The event cost $40,000, paid through Coastal Transport Consulting for client entertainment expenses. My son had become a criminal mastermind, funding a completely fictitious identity, with money stolen from his own family's company. Soon, that fantasy would become a federal nightmare. By spring of the second year, Crawford Logistics was approaching financial collapse, and our employees were beginning to panic. Derek's systematic theft had drained our operating capital, forcing me to watch 35 years of work crumble, while I built the case that would destroy him. The first layoffs came in March. We had to terminate 15 drivers and 3 office staff members, good people, who'd worked loyally for Crawford Logistics for years. I called each one personally, explaining we were facing temporary market challenges that required difficult operational adjustments. "Mr. Crawford," said Tommy Valdez, a driver who'd been with us for 12 years, "is the company going to be okay? My wife's pregnant with our 3rd child." "We're working through some financial difficulties," I replied, hating myself for the euphemism. "I'm exploring several options to stabilize our situation." What I couldn't tell Tommy was that our financial difficulties were caused by my son systematically stealing money to fund his Miami lifestyle, and that I was allowing it to continue to ensure Derek faced federal prison time. Linda Williams approached me after processing the severance paperwork for the terminated employees. Her eyes were red from crying. "Mr. Crawford, I've worked here for 8 years and I've never seen anything like this. Are we going bankrupt?" "Linda, Crawford Logistics has survived many challenges over the decades. We'll find a way through this one." She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her expression. Linda was smart enough to recognize the signs of a failing business, even if she didn't understand the cause. Meanwhile, Derek continued his performance as concerned CFO, appearing genuinely worried about our financial situation during staff meetings. His acting skills had become frightening in their sophistication. "We need to explore additional financing options," Derek announced during our April management meeting. "Perhaps a line of credit secured by our equipment assets, or possibly bringing in a strategic investor." Mike Torres leaned forward. "What kind of investor? Someone who understands the transportation industry?" "I've been networking with several Florida-based investment groups," Derek replied smoothly. "They're interested in companies with strong fundamentals that need growth capital." I nearly laughed at the audacity. Derek was suggesting we bring in investors to replace the money he'd stolen, while simultaneously using that stolen money to convince Miami investors he was worth partnering with. He was planning to solve the crisis he'd created by expanding his fraudulent schemes. Our bank relationships had become strained as Derek's theft created cash flow problems. First National had called twice requesting meetings about our credit line utilization. Our accounts payable had stretched to 90 days, and several vendors were demanding immediate payment or threatening to suspend services. The surveillance footage showed Derek's complete comfort with the company's deteriorating condition. I watched him authorize another $150,000 payment to Innovative Supply Chain Management, while reviewing termination letters for employees we couldn't afford to keep. He felt no guilt about destroying people's livelihoods to fund his fantasy life. Agent Chen provided updates about Derek's escalating Miami activities. He's now claiming to control a $500 million transportation network, she reported during our monthly meeting. He's trying to convince Victoria's father to invest $2 million in a fake expansion project. How much longer do we need to let this continue? 6 more months maximum. We're documenting RICO violations, securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and investment fraud. The case is becoming bulletproof, but your company may not survive much longer. She was right. Crawford Logistics was hemorrhaging money faster than Derek could steal it. Our credit had been exhausted. Our equipment was aging without maintenance, and our best employees were accepting offers from competitors. The breaking point came in June when we lost our largest client, Henderson Manufacturing, who cited concerns about our operational stability. That contract represented $2.8 million in annual revenue, money we desperately needed to keep the company alive. Derek's reaction to losing. Henderson was perfectly calculated. "This is devastating," he announced during an emergency management meeting. "We need immediate action to prevent further client defections." He proposed several solutions, all of which involved bringing in outside investment or taking on additional debt. What he didn't mention was that Henderson had left because our service quality had declined due to deferred maintenance and reduced staffing, both consequences of his theft. That evening, I sat in my study reviewing our financial projections. Without Henderson's contract and with Derek continuing to steal approximately $400,000 per month, Crawford Logistics would be insolvent within 6 months. The company I'd spent my life building would be completely destroyed to ensure my son faced justice. Janet found me working late the next evening. "Mr. Crawford, employees are asking questions I can't answer. Should I tell them everything's going to be okay?" I looked at Janet, who'd been my assistant for 22 years, who'd helped me build Crawford Logistics from a small operation into a regional empire. She deserved honesty, but I couldn't give it to her. "Tell them we're exploring all available options," I said. "Are we going to make it through this?" The question hung in the air between us. Crawford Logistics would not survive Derek's theft, and my decision to document rather than stop it. But Derek would face federal charges that would destroy his life completely. "Janet," I finally replied. "Sometimes survival requires accepting loss," she nodded, though I could see the confusion in her eyes. The next morning, she would face another day of fielding questions from worried employees while their CFO processed payments to fund his Miami penthouse. By July, we were 3 months away from bankruptcy, and Derek was still stealing money to maintain his elaborate lie. The morning of October 15th started like any other, with Derek arriving at Crawford Logistics at 8:30 a.m., carrying his usual coffee and newspaper. He had no idea it would be his last day as a free man. Agent Chen had called the night before. "We're ready to move. Derek has stolen over $12 million, and we've documented systematic fraud across multiple jurisdictions. The arrest warrants are signed. $12 million. Nearly 2/3 of our annual revenue, stolen over 26 months while I watched and documented every crime." I arrived at the office early, as I had every day for 35 years, but this morning felt different. The federal marshals would execute Derek's arrest warrant at his Miami apartment at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. By the time he normally arrived for work, my son would be in federal custody. At 9:15 a.m., Derek knocked on my office door. "Dad, do you have a few minutes? I want to discuss the Henderson contract replacement." "Of course, son. Come in." Derek sat across from my desk, pulling out his tablet to show financial projections for potential new clients. He looked confident, relaxed, completely unaware that federal agents had just seized his Miami apartment, his luxury cars, and all of his bank accounts. "I think we should consider expanding our Florida operations," Derek said, scrolling through his fabricated business plan. "The market down there is really developing." I nodded, studying my son's face. Derek had become so comfortable with deception that he could discuss business expansion while knowing the company was bankrupt due to his theft. Even now, with federal marshals searching his apartment, he was planning to steal more money. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen. "Subject in custody. Miami apartment secured. Assets frozen." "That's interesting," I replied to Derek. Tell me more about your Florida connections." Derek's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "Well, I've been developing relationships with several key players in the Miami logistics market. There's real opportunity for strategic partnerships." Strategic partnerships. Derek was still using euphemisms for his criminal network, even as the FBI was arresting his co-conspirators. At 10:30 a.m., Janet knocked and entered without waiting for permission. Unusual for her. "Mr. Crawford, there are several federal agents here to see you. They say it's urgent." Derek's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "Federal agents? What could they want?" "I'm not sure," I replied, watching his face carefully. "Let's go find out together." Agent Chen waited in our main conference room with 3 other federal agents and 2 men in expensive suits who I assumed were prosecutors. She looked directly at Derek as we entered. "Derek Crawford, you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud." The color drained from Derek's face as Agent Chen read him his Miranda rights. He looked at me with complete confusion as if I could somehow explain this impossible situation. "Dad, what is this? There must be some mistake." I met his eyes directly. "There's no mistake, Derek. I know about Southeast Development Solutions. I know about Coastal Transport Consulting. I know about all 17 companies." Derek's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time in 2 years, my son was speechless. "I know about the Miami apartment, the cars, the girlfriend. I know you've stolen over $12 million from Crawford Logistics while I watched and documented every transaction." "You watched?" Agent Chen stepped forward. "Your father has been cooperating with our investigation for 26 months. Every fraudulent payment, every fake invoice, every lie you told. We have it all on surveillance footage and financial records." Derek stared at me with a mixture of shock, betrayal, and dawning realization. "You let me do this? You let me destroy the company?" "You were already destroying it," I replied. "I just made sure you faced the full consequences." The federal agents placed Derek in handcuffs as prosecutors explained the charges. Wire fraud across state lines. Money laundering through shell companies. Securities fraud for the fake investment schemes. RICO violations for operating a criminal enterprise. Each charge carried potential decades in federal prison. "Derek Crawford," Agent Chen announced formally, "you're also charged with bankruptcy, fraud, and conspiracy to defraud. Creditors in connection with Crawford. Logistics financial collapse. Derek's." Knees buckled slightly as the full scope of his legal situation became clear. He looked at me one final time as the agents prepared to escort him from the building. "I'm your son," he whispered. "Yes," I replied, "and I'm the father who taught you that actions have consequences." As they led Derek away, I could hear the whispers of our employees who had gathered to watch their CFO being arrested by federal agents. The 34 remaining staff members, all that was left of our once 340-person workforce, would have questions I couldn't fully answer. That afternoon, I stood in the empty warehouse that had once buzzed with activity from hundreds of employees loading trucks for deliveries across the Southeast. Crawford Logistics was finished. Derek's theft and the legal proceedings would consume whatever assets remained. But my son would spend the next 25 years in federal prison, understanding exactly what it meant to take what wasn't his. Sometimes justice requires sacrificing everything you've built. Derek's arraignment took place 3 days after his arrest, in the imposing federal courthouse on Ted Turner Drive. I sat in the gallery watching my son shuffle into the courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles, looking nothing like the confident Miami socialite he'd pretended to be. The charges read by the prosecutor were staggering in their scope. 18 counts of wire fraud, 12 counts of money laundering, 8 counts of securities fraud, 3 RICO violations for operating a criminal enterprise. Each count carried potential decades in federal prison under the sentencing guidelines. "Your Honor," Assistant U.S. Attorney Patricia Morales announced, the defendant systematically embezzled over $12 million from his family's company while using that stolen money to defraud additional victims in Miami, the government has overwhelming evidence of a sophisticated criminal operation, spanning multiple states and jurisdictions. Derek's court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking public defender named Robert Kim, could only request reasonable bail while acknowledging the severity of the charges. The prosecutor immediately objected. The defendant has demonstrated a pattern of elaborate deception and has significant financial resources hidden in offshore accounts, Morales argued. He poses both a flight risk and a danger to the community through continued fraud schemes. Judge Margaret Thompson, a no-nonsense jurist with 30 years of federal experience, denied bail without hesitation. Mr. Crawford will remain in federal custody pending trial. The court finds clear and convincing evidence that no condition of release would reasonably assure the appearance of the defendant. Derek looked back at me from the defendant's table, his eyes pleading for some sign of paternal support. I remained expressionless, arms crossed, watching my son face the consequences of 26 months of systematic theft. The evidence presentation during preliminary hearings was devastating. Agent Chen testified about the surveillance footage showing Derek processing fraudulent payments while laughing about his trusting father. Financial experts from Williams and Associates detailed the complex shell company network Derek had created to launder stolen money. The Miami apartment raid had yielded additional evidence of Derek's fraudulent lifestyle. Federal agents had seized over $800,000 in luxury goods, jewelry, electronics, art, designer clothing, all purchased with Crawford Logistics funds. His vehicle collection alone was worth $2.3 million. But the most damaging evidence came from Derek's own words. The FBI had recorded dozens of phone conversations where Derek bragged about manipulating his family's company and described his elaborate plans to steal even more money. The old man built this place from nothing. Derek's voice echoed through the courtroom speakers. But he doesn't understand modern finance. As long as quarterly reports look good, he stays out of my way. I watched Derek's face crumble as the prosecutor played recording after recording of him discussing his crimes with casual arrogance. His defense attorney took notes frantically, but there was no defending against Derek's own admissions of guilt. The Miami fraud charges added another layer of complexity to Derek's legal nightmare. Victoria Castellanos' father had lost $1.8 million investing in Derek's fake expansion projects. 3 other Miami investors had been defrauded of additional amounts totaling $3.2 million. Mr. Crawford used stolen money to establish credibility, testified Miami investor Carlos Mendoza, who had lost $750,000. He showed us financial documents claiming his company was worth $500 million. We believed we were investing with a successful transportation magnate. Derek's plea negotiations began in December, 3 months after his arrest. His new attorney, privately retained by selling what remained of his legitimate assets, was David Sterling, one of Atlanta's most expensive white-collar defense lawyers. Sterling met with prosecutors to discuss a potential plea agreement, but the terms were harsh. The government wanted Derek to plead guilty to all major charges in exchange for a recommended sentence of 22 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Your client operated a criminal enterprise for over 2 years, Prosecutor Morales explained during negotiations. He stole from his own family, defrauded multiple victims, and showed no remorse until he was caught. The sentencing guidelines support 25 to 30 years. Sterling requested a meeting with me, hoping I might provide character testimony that could reduce Derek's sentence. We met at his downtown law office on a cold January afternoon. "Mr. Crawford, your son is facing essentially a life sentence," Sterling said. "Any statement from you about his character, his family relationships, his potential for rehabilitation, it could make a significant difference." I studied Sterling across his mahogany desk, surrounded by law books and degrees from prestigious universities. "Mr. Sterling, Derek spent 26 months systematically destroying everything I built while lying to my face every single day. What character testimony would you like me to provide? Perhaps something about his childhood, his relationship with his deceased mother, The pressure of working in a family business. Derek chose to steal $12 million while 340 people depended on Crawford Logistics for their livelihoods. He chose to lie to investors and fraud victims in Miami. He chose to betray every person who trusted him. Sterling leaned forward. The sentencing guidelines allow for departures based on family circumstances, acceptance of responsibility, cooperation with authorities. Has Derek accepted responsibility? Has he expressed remorse for destroying people's lives? Has he offered to cooperate in recovering the stolen money? Sterling's silence answered my questions. Mr. Sterling, I continued, my son made his choices. Now he can live with the consequences. Derek's trial was scheduled for March, but he ultimately accepted the plea agreement rather than face the possibility of an even longer sentence. The guilty plea hearing lasted less than 30 minutes. Mr. Crawford, Judge Thompson addressed Derek directly. Do you understand that by pleading guilty, you are admitting to operating a criminal enterprise that stole over $12 million and defrauded multiple victims? Yes, Your Honor. Do you understand that your actions resulted in the bankruptcy of a family business and the unemployment of hundreds of people? Derek's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Sentencing will be scheduled for May 15th. Until then, you will remain in federal custody. As Derek was led away in shackles, he looked back at me one final time. I met his gaze directly, wanting him to understand that justice had been served exactly as intended. Some betrayals require complete consequences even when they destroy everything in the process. Derek's sentencing hearing took place on a humid May morning, with Judge Thompson's courtroom packed with former Crawford Logistics employees, Miami fraud victims, and media representatives covering what had become Atlanta's most notorious white-collar crime case. The defendant will rise, Judge Thompson commanded, her voice echoing through the silent courtroom. Derek stood beside his attorney, wearing an ill-fitting navy suit that made him look smaller than the confident CFO who had once commanded respect in our boardroom. 26 months in federal custody had aged him dramatically. Gray hair, hollow cheeks, the defeated posture of a man who understood his life was effectively over. Derek Matthew Crawford, Judge Thompson continued, you have pleaded guilty to operating a criminal enterprise that systematically defrauded your family's company of over $12 million while simultaneously defrauding additional victims in Miami of over $3 million. The prosecutor, Patricia Morales, had requested the maximum sentence under federal guidelines. Your Honor, the defendant's crimes were not impulsive mistakes but calculated acts of betrayal spanning 26 months. He stole from his own father's company while looking him in the eye every day, lying to employees whose livelihoods depended on that stolen money. Morales gestured toward the gallery where several former Crawford Logistics employees sat watching. Linda Williams, our accounting manager, still struggles to find stable employment. Tommy Valdez, a driver for 12 years, lost his home when he couldn't find work after our company's collapse. 34 families were destroyed by the defendant's greed. Derek's attorney made a final plea for mercy, citing Derek's cooperation with asset forfeiture proceedings and his expressions of remorse. But Sterling's arguments felt hollow against the overwhelming evidence of Derek's calculated betrayal. Your Honor, I stood when Judge Thompson invited victim impact statements. I am Benjamin Crawford, the defendant's father and former owner of Crawford Logistics. The courtroom fell completely silent as I walked to the podium. Derek stared at me with desperate hope, perhaps believing his father might finally offer forgiveness or mitigation. For 35 years, I built Crawford Logistics from a single delivery truck into a company that employed 340 people and served hundreds of clients across the Southeast. I built it as a legacy for my family, something that would outlast my lifetime and provide security for future generations. I looked directly at Derek. The defendant didn't just steal money. He stole the dreams and security of every person who depended on Crawford Logistics. He stole the legacy his mother and I worked decades to create. He stole the trust that makes families and businesses possible. Derek's eyes filled with tears, but I continued without emotion. Most painful of all, he did this while pretending to be a loving son and responsible executive. He attended Sunday dinners at my home, discussing his mother's memory, while using her company's money to fund his criminal lifestyle in Miami. I paused, letting the weight of Derek's betrayal settle in the courtroom. Your Honor, the defendant has shown no genuine remorse for destroying 340 jobs and multiple families. He has not volunteered to forfeit assets that could help his victims. He accepted this plea agreement only to avoid the possibility of life imprisonment. Judge Thompson nodded grimly. Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Mr. Derek Crawford, do you wish to make a statement before sentencing? Derek rose unsteadily, his voice breaking as he attempted to address the court. Your Honor, I know what I did was wrong. I betrayed everyone who trusted me, especially my father who gave me every opportunity to succeed honestly. His words sounded rehearsed, calculated for maximum sympathy rather than genuine contrition. I think about the employees who lost their jobs because of my actions. I think about the investors in Miami who trusted me with their money. I know I destroyed lives, and I will carry that guilt forever. Judge Thompson listened without expression, then delivered Derek's sentence with clinical precision. Derek Matthew Crawford, you are hereby sentenced to 23 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution of $15.2 million to identified victims, and all assets obtained through criminal activity are subject to forfeiture. 23 years. Derek would be 54 years old when released, assuming he survived federal prison. His prime adult years would be spent in a concrete cell, understanding exactly what it meant to lose everything through his own choices. As federal marshals placed Derek in handcuffs, he looked at me one final time. Dad, I'm sorry. I met his gaze without flinching. I'm sorry too, Derek. Sorry that you chose to become someone I couldn't recognize. The courtroom emptied slowly, with former employees and fraud victims expressing mixed satisfaction with Derek's sentence. Some felt justice had been served. Others believed no punishment could restore what they'd lost. Linda Williams approached me in the hallway. Mr. Crawford, I want you to know that most of us don't blame you for what Derek did. We understand you were a victim too. Thank you, Linda. I hope you found stability with your new position. She nodded sadly. It's been difficult, but we're managing. I wish we could have saved the company somehow. So do I replied, though we both knew Crawford Logistics could never have survived the scope of Derek's betrayal. That evening, I sat in my Buckhead home, surrounded by the silence that had filled the house since Margaret's death and Derek's imprisonment. The family business was gone. The family legacy was destroyed. My only son would spend the next 2 decades in federal prison. But justice had been served completely, without compromise or mercy for the undeserving. Some prices are worth paying, even when they cost everything you've spent your lifetime building. The demolition crew arrived at Crawford Logistics on a gray December morning, 2 years after Derek's sentencing. I stood in the empty parking lot, watching workers prepare to tear down the building, where I'd spent 35 years creating something meaningful from nothing. The bankruptcy court had finally approved the property sale to a commercial developer who planned to build luxury condominiums. The $8.2 million from the sale would go toward partially satisfying Derek's restitution obligations, though it represented less than half of what he'd stolen from victims. Derek was serving his sentence at FCI Coleman Medium in Florida, a federal prison about 4 hours from the Miami lifestyle he'd destroyed his life to maintain. According to his prison counselor, who contacted me monthly per court requirements, Derek spent his days working in the facility's kitchen for $0.23 per hour, a dramatic change from his former position as CFO of a multi-million-dollar company. He'd written me 17 letters over the past 2 years. I'd read none of them. The asset forfeiture proceedings had recovered approximately $4.8 million in cash, luxury goods, and real estate Derek had purchased with stolen money. His Miami apartment contents were auctioned, with proceeds going to fraud victims. The luxury car collection was seized and sold by federal marshals. Victoria Castellanos, Derek's former Miami girlfriend, had testified against him during asset forfeiture hearings, revealing additional hidden accounts and luxury purchases. She'd also filed a civil lawsuit claiming Derek had defrauded her of $300,000 in gifts and shared expenses, though her chances of recovery were minimal. Of Crawford Logistics' original 340 employees, I'd managed to track the employment status of about half through LinkedIn and personal contacts. Some had found comparable positions with other transportation companies. Others had been forced to change careers entirely, accepting lower-paying jobs outside the logistics industry. Tommy Valdez, the driver whose pregnant wife I still remembered, had eventually found work with a smaller trucking company, though at significantly reduced pay. Linda Williams had taken a bookkeeping position with a non-profit organization, earning less than half her Crawford Logistics salary. Mike Torres, our former operations manager, had started his own small delivery service with 2 other former Crawford employees. The business was struggling but provided enough income to support the 3 families involved. The personal cost of justice had been steeper than I'd anticipated. At 71, I found myself financially comfortable but socially isolated. Many people in Atlanta's business community viewed me as either a hero who'd sacrificed everything to stop corporate fraud, or a vindictive father who'd destroyed his own company to punish his son. The truth, as usual, was more complex than either narrative suggested. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, my therapist, had helped me process the psychological aftermath of Derek's crimes and my response to them. "You chose to prioritize justice over family loyalty," she'd explained during one session. "That decision required enormous personal strength, but it also carries permanent consequences." Do you think I made the right choice? The right choice for whom? Derek faces consequences proportional to his crimes. His victims received some measure of justice, but 340 innocent employees lost their jobs because you chose documentation over intervention. If I'd confronted Derek immediately, he would have covered his tracks and continued stealing. The legal system would have struggled to prove systematic fraud without extensive evidence. Perhaps early intervention could have stopped the theft while preserving the company and those jobs. Was a question I'd never be able to answer definitively. I'd established a small foundation, using the remainder of my personal savings to provide job training and placement assistance for former Crawford Logistics employees. It wasn't much, perhaps $200,000 total, but it represented my acknowledgement that my pursuit of justice had consequences for innocent people. The foundation's first recipient was Tommy Valdez's pregnant wife, who received funding for nursing school after Tommy's reduced income made her original college plans impossible. She'd graduated the previous spring and now worked at Piedmont Atlanta Hospital, earning more than Tommy had made at Crawford Logistics. On quiet evenings at home, I sometimes wondered what Margaret would have thought about my choices. She'd been a woman of strong moral principles who believed in both justice and family loyalty. Would she have supported my decision to destroy Derek legally, or would she have advocated for attempting rehabilitation and forgiveness? I suspected she would have been torn, just as I continued to be. The demolition foreman approached as workers began removing equipment from the Crawford Logistics building. "Mr. Crawford, we're ready to begin structural demolition. Is there anything you'd like to salvage before we proceed?" I looked at the building one final time, remembering Margaret's excitement when we'd first signed the lease, Derek's pride when I'd promoted him to CFO, the hundreds of employees who'd worked here building something meaningful. "No," I replied. "Tear it all down." As the wrecking ball swung toward the Crawford Logistics sign, I thought about Derek sitting in his federal prison cell, probably wondering if his father would ever visit or respond to his letters. He would serve 21 more years, understanding every day what it meant to lose everything through his own choices. Some betrayals require total consequences, even when justice comes at the cost of everything you've built. I'd chosen to destroy my son to stop him from destroying others, and I would live with that choice for whatever years remained to me. The building fell in a cloud of dust and debris, taking with it the last physical evidence of the Crawford family's transportation empire. but the lessons embedded in its destruction, about trust, consequences, and the true cost of justice, would outlast any structure we might have built. In the end, perhaps that was legacy enough, if you made it through Benjamin Crawford's incredible story of justice and betrayal. You've just experienced one of the most complex moral dilemmas we've ever covered on this channel. Benjamin's choice to destroy his own son through federal prosecution raises profound questions about family loyalty, justice, and the price we're willing to pay to do what's right. What do you think about Benjamin's decision? Was he a hero who stopped a criminal, or a vindictive father who went too far? Did Derek deserve 23 years in federal prison, or should family bonds have led to a different outcome? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspectives often reveal angles I hadn't considered. If this story kept you engaged from beginning to end, smash that like button to help more people discover these incredible true stories. And don't forget to subscribe for more cases that will challenge everything you think you know about justice, family, and moral complexity. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most difficult decisions reveal who we truly are when everything is on the line.